All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first Tech Challenge Coach and Captain's Call. Thank you for being with us. Let's just start with a word of prayer and we'll jump in and share a few things. A couple of us are going to share some things and then we'll open up for any questions along the way as well. So, from you folks. So, let's just have a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for everybody that's here. Thank you for the difference that they're making in the lives of young people. And we just want to ask you to be with us and to give everyone courage for their school year and their season. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we are well into the season here in getting ready for First Tech Challenge Center Stage this year. So it looks like a fun, exciting game. We're super excited for it. A couple changes, of course, we've had this year. One is that our tournament date is moved to April 14. Um, so that's a new tournament date for those who have done it before. We used to combine the FTC championship and the first LEGO League championship all of the same day in the same gym. And it got to be just a little bit of a logistical challenge. So we decided it was time to split it up and to change that. So this year will be the first one. We'll be doing independently, just First Tech Challenge. We're also looking at growing. It's very likely that we will have a two-field tournament this year. So it will be a bigger tournament, and so we want to be able to do that. So it'll just help us have it be a better experience for everyone by having a separate tournament date. So we're excited about that. This call, by the way, is being recorded, so we will post it on our YouTube channel after the call. So if you need it, and we'll put the link out to everybody as well, in case we always know everybody's schedule's different, and it's sometimes difficult to make it. And we know the information is valuable to you. So give me just a second to adjust a couple things here, and I am going to share my screen. A couple things I'll point out to you as we get started. So let me just share my screen here. So a couple of resources for you. Just a sec. Okay, a couple of resources. First is the FTC Docs website. If you're not familiar with this one, it is a great website for you. The easiest is to search FTC Docs. Actually, it'll come up really easily for you. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat here as well, so it's available for you. Alrighty, there's that link in the chat. So this has a lot of resources. It has access to the game manuals, the game Q&A forum. That's where any updates or if you have questions, that's where they can get dropped into there. So this is a great resource for you. A lot of information in here. So if you're a new team, if you're a returning team, for both you and coaches, one of the new things this year is April tags. So if you want to learn about April tags, there's a link here for April tags to look at that. A lot of information available there. Another site will let you know if you just search FTC Game Manual, you'll come up with this website. This also has some links. Most of these are on the other one, but it's just another one to check into occasionally. I really like the other one. And here's a little hidden gem for you. And this is actually, let me drop this one in the chat for those of you that are here as well. So you have that link. The other one that's a little bit of a hidden gem that nobody thinks about often is this is the First Tech Challenge volunteer resources. So if you were to search for FTC volunteer resources, this would come up for you. And why would teams care about volunteer resources? Well, one of the reasons why is this has judge and judge advisor. So if you want to know how the judging works and get all those details in the back end, there's nothing secret here. You can actually see how it works. You can go in and go, oh, that's how that works. This is what they're going to go by. This is the manual. Here's the judge manual that the judges use. So nothing secret about it. And so for the teams that want to do the extra little bit there, a lot of other resources available there for you. Spend what time you want to or not want to in there. but it just, a couple of these, like in the judging area, might be helpful to you. There is a mentor manual here, which would probably be useful to you. And I'll go ahead and just drop this link right into here. So that can be a helpful one as you're working through what you're doing there as well. So probably the mentor manual in your judge resources there could be useful if you want to look at scorekeeping, what score sheets are and that kind of stuff. Clearly, there's a lot of things you don't need to do in there, but all that information is public, nothing secret. But a lot of teams don't even realize that that's there. So a couple little tips there for you as you're looking through that. So one other thing to mention here as well, and as of this afternoon, we now have event registration. So if you go to adventistrobotics.net, and I'll drop this in the chat as well for you, but if you go to adventistrobotics.net and you mouse over registration, we now have First Tech Challenge event registration. So you can go ahead and register for the event and get that registered and get that taken care of and be all ready. So there is one other thing that you have to do to be ready for the event as far as paperwork goes, and that has to do with your first dashboard. So if you go to your first dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and go here and just show this, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. Okay, I'm going to try to log in. There we go. Sometimes it does that to me. When you look at your teams here, there's a couple things that you can do in here. So each team needs to have two coaches signed up. So you can see I actually haven't paid for these teams. I just use these to talk about it, to show things. So you have to have two coaches signed up on here. Each team has to have two coaches. The second coach could be a principal, could be another teacher, somebody else, but you have to have two coaches. And that's important to do in there. And they both have to be screened. You need to sign the consent. So consent forms, if you come here, there's a number like acknowledgement forms and different things like that. You also need to do the youth protection screening. That's uses Sterling volunteers, and you have to make sure that you've gone through the screening. And we understand that if you're a teacher, you've probably done a lot more thorough screening than that, but this is a requirement that First has of all coaches. Once you have two coaches, then you can add youth members into it. So this is where you will have them sign up. Basically the parents need to do this. They need to sign the consent form for them. And this is really cool. There's a new express enrollment here this year. But in order to do this, you have to have two coaches that are completed and screened, and then you have this available for you. And looking for so there will be this QR code link right here that you can click on. And I can't do that right now because I don't have two coaches that are screened and it's not a paid registration. But once you do that, you'll have that QR code. You can share that with your parents, and it's a very quick and easy way for parents to do that. If you've done First Tech Challenge and gone through the sign up process in the past, it's always been a little bit cumbersome. And this has been very streamlined for you. So, but in order for that QR code link to be active, you have to have two coaches that have gone through the youth protection program screening. So for that. So do get that done. The sooner you get that done, the better. Every year there are teams who come to tournaments who have not done that, and when they show up at the tournament and that's not done, it creates stress for you as a coach that is not needed on the day of the tournament. You have enough other things to take care of besides that. So we don't want to turn anybody down, but we have to have this completed for everybody. It is a requirement, and so if it's not done ahead of time, there's always some scrambling for that. So please do take some time, get that done, make sure everything on your first dashboard is taken care of, and that will be a big help to you. For the tournament, our tournament actually will start on Saturday night. We'll have a Vespers for everybody, and then our tournament will start Saturday night. What we do Saturday night is we do the inspection. So there are 2 inspections that need to be done. And so if you come, let's see if the inspections, it's in Game Manual Part 1. And if you go all the way to the end, there are, I think it's in Game Manual Part 1. There we go. Yep, there are 2 inspections that have to be done. There is the robot inspection, and this is a checklist, and I encourage you to go through, have your team start going through this now. You may not be ready for it. That's fine. Doesn't matter whether you're checked off or not, but your robot has to pass robot inspection, and it also has to pass field inspection. So what's the difference between the two? Robot inspection has to do with what the parts the robot has on it and whether they're legal or not. And the field inspection has to do with how the software, the driver, how everything works, and verifying that all the software is right, the firmwares have all been updated and that kind of thing, and it's ready to go from a software driving perspective, the actual, make sure everything works there. So both of those have to be completed. And so we will do those inspections Saturday night, because if there's a problem, if you've traveled all the way here, we don't want to say, hey, too bad, see you later, can't compete. We do our best to make sure. We've never had anybody not compete. And other teams will help you out. We'll get resources if you need it. But again, the better prepared you are on these 2 checklists, the less stress you will have on the day of the tournament. So we want to get all this done Saturday night so that we're ready to go in the morning with judging. And if there's any final inspection details that are not there, but there's a lot of little things in here. So take a look at it. When you look on the right-hand side over here, this refers to the rule that this particular item references. So if you have a question, for example, here, robot does not contain materials that are hazardous. Well, what is the definition of hazardous? Well, if you look at RG01C, it will tell you exactly what they mean by hazardous materials, and you can look that up and find that information out. So that's how you can reference all of that. You can look it up in the rule book for that. One other thing that I will note on this one here, and we did mention that just a little bit, but there is the Q&A forum, and the Q&A forum has updates to the rules. So it's important to keep up, kind of have somebody monitor and watch that as well. All right, any questions on what I've covered so far?
I got a question, Mel.
Yeah.
Do you know if you mentioned about registering on the first site? If we register and participate in a local state, can we register for ARL concurrently, or do we have to wait until we're finished with that one in February?
You can register for our event. I need to double check. They've changed some rules on that. In fact, I need to make a note because I need to make some phone calls on that. Because they have changed some rules related to competing in multiple regions. And I don't have, I need to get some clarity on that one. So, but you can go ahead and register. We'll make it work one way or the other for you. I think we can make that work, but we just need to get some clarity from FIRST on it because we're a little bit unusual in how we do that. So.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Hey, Mel, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, so when I register the coaches, do both coaches have to attend, or does only one need to attend the event? I'm working on a second sponsor, and it might be kind of, that
We,
be the person being
w-
coach or make a.
yeah, we don't worry about that. You have to have two there. Obviously, when you come to the event, you're going to have your own requirements for travel and all that kind of stuff, overnight trips that you're going to take care of as far as that goes, for your school. So they don't necessarily have to be at the event. We don't check to
Okay.
say, oh, this person's not here. Sorry, you can't come. No, we don't worry about that. But if they are there, they have to be on that list as far as students go anyway. Now, obviously, you're gonna have what do I want to say, chaperones, sponsors, people coming along on the trip itself that may or may not be coaches, and that's okay. But anybody who's actually working with the team on a regular basis, good to have them on there, and certainly all of your students have to be on that list.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So next on our agenda here, we're going to turn this over to Fiona, who is our judge advisor, to talk about judging. And then after that, Sam, who's our head referee, will talk about any game specific things to be aware of at this point in the season.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So nice to see everybody. I don't have much to say yet at this time of the season, but yes, judging. It's important that you're starting with an engineering notebook right at the beginning, and also have a plan as to how to condense your notebook into a portfolio. Thinking about those things now and having a plan and working towards them makes life much easier at the competition. That's my tip for today. Should I have more tips?
So I'll add one to that, Fiona, and that is take some time if you haven't done so already, and look at the awards in Game Manual Part. It's Game Manual Part 1. I believe it's Section 9. Talks about the awards. And the reason you want to do that is that if you want to really get the best experience out of everything possible, you will try to cover all the different aspects of those different awards. If you're a beginning team and a rookie team, you're going to do some better than others. It's okay if you don't do everything. It doesn't mean you won't be successful. But that kind of, if you look at that, that helps get the breadth of what's there. And you're also paying attention. And honestly, I'll tell you what, my first year, I didn't pay any attention to any of that. And we got to the competition. We're like, engineering notebook, what's that? We're supposed to have an engineering notebook. So don't feel bad if those kinds of things happen. If you find something, get the competition, you go, oh, was I supposed to have that? Hey, it's okay. We're going to have a good time, and we'll be successful with it. These calls will help you get the key things involved in it. But still, those awards really do help you understand the breadth of what goes on with it. So that you have the best experience and get the most out of it. So a good team a strong team will end up covering all those various aspects. But sometimes teams choose to focus just on certain areas because that's what they're capable, what they have the capacity to do that particular year, and they're going to build toward it. And that's okay. There's not a right and wrong to it. But that it kind of gives you an idea of the overview. Again, that's Game Manual Part 1, Section 9 is the section that has that.
Yes. And before I start talking about referee things, to add on to what was said about judging, Fiona talked about starting a notebook, some kind of documentation to record your season. One piece of advice I often give for judging is you want to remember the cool moments that happen. Like a lot of the time at this part of the season, there's going to be some significant learning going on as students start prototyping and playing around with things, and they figure stuff out. And the purpose, one of the big things you can do with documentation is you can remember those cool moments that otherwise would get forgotten as the season goes on. You know, the competition is months away, and maybe there was some really cool like initial prototyping that happened, but if it doesn't get written down, nobody remembers that they even did it by the time we actually get to competition. And being able to kind of tell those stories is one of the things that really helps you stand out to judges. Is a like a neat story like that's kind of a little bit personal is a great answer to a judge's question generally. And so remembering those, writing those down is a really good idea. I will then segue into referee. Similarly to Fiona, there's not a lot to say yet at this point in the season, but I've got a few things, got a few resources. I want to mention the Q&A forum. So the way that updates are done, the way the rules are changed through the season in FTC is via the official Q&A forum. And yes, Mel's going to share screen and go find it, which is awesome. And as an FTC team, you have an account on that forum that you can access. It's under your team number. It is a good idea to, even if you don't have a question right now, it's a good idea to find your account and figure out how to use it. Because I've had teams where they needed to ask a question, because sometimes if you have something that's at the edge of the rules, and you'll ask locally, and the response will be, well, you should go ask that on the forum to get an official ruling. And they needed to do that, and then they had never used their account before, and they logged on and they had to fight with IT for like a week in order to get that account working. So if you do that now, then that's if you ever need it, you'll have it.
And Sam, I think their point is that you can read it in any point in time.
Yes,
that everything's
absolutely.
publicly available to read without an account. But in order to ask a question, if you want to post it, you have to use that account that's been given to you. Yep. So knowing how to get into it is useful. So you're not stressed out at the last minute. Where is that again?
Yep. My favorite way to read the questions is if you go down the bottom there and it says all answers on one page. I like that. It may be the ones that are kind of, there's a curated version that you can access, and that can be good, but I find that sometimes missing like some context. Sometimes a question will reference another question. The all answers on one page, the downside is it can be overwhelming because there's a lot of content there. But this way, if you want to find something about a specific thing, say you want to find all the questions on drones, you do Control F and you do drone. And then you can look through the different questions that are about drones. And then that kind of, that sort of method of finding out where everything is. It's definitely a big and somewhat unwieldy document, but this is the way that changes get made to the rules. And yeah, there aren't any particular questions that I want to highlight at this time, but that's the Q&A, definitely important resource. The other resource I wanted to mention is in the season materials page. And it's called, I actually discovered it while I was preparing for this meeting. If we go down the bottom, it's called Is Your Drone Legal? So the drone is the little paper airplane, if you've seen the game animation. And if you've read the rules, there are specific rules on exactly what your drone needs in Game Manual Part 1. But some of those rules may seem somewhat subjective, and that's because they are. And so Is Your Drone Legal is a resource to help you figure out how to parse, how to understand those rules, particularly the ones that basically talk about, they want it to look like a traditional paper airplane. But what does that mean? well, here's an explanation of what that means and what the terms wings and fuselage, what do those mean? And so some examples of legal drones, some examples of illegal drones. And there is also, I believe, a link where you can send, if you have a fully competition legal drone that you wish to have evaluated, you can send it to that link and find out. So the drone is kind of one of the more fun aspects of this season.
So a wad of paper is not a drone then.
A wad of paper is not a drone. An origami swan is not a drone. I don't know. I feel like maybe it has a fuselage and wings, but apparently no. No, origami swan's not a drone. I don't know that you could get the origami swan to go where you wanted it to go over the truss and off the field. But anyway.
Here's the link for the upload there. It's on.
So that I think that covers the stuff I wanted, though. It's worth noting this does a good job of talking about the rules regarding like what it needs to look like, the rules for what it needs to be made of, the like 20-pound uncoated paper of a 8.5 by 11 or A4 size or smaller. Those rules are in Game Manual Part 1. But yes, so that covers me. And Joseph,
20-pound paper is standard photocopier paper.
It does not mean a sheet of paper that weighs 20 pounds.
Joseph has a question.
Yep. Yeah, so that was my section.
So one thing, this is kind of a question I know that's been brought up in different regions, especially SoCal. They made a drone that has design applications to it to make it like, because the team member who made it was very gifted in origami. So they made this, it looked like an airplane, but it had other design elements to it with the piece of paper folded in, that made it less of a paper airplane standard design, but different. It was ruled legal, but then other regions I know have ruled stuff like that illegal. So I'm not sure how that would be ruled.
So it seems
Yeah.
like the Is Your Drone legal resource, like since it includes a place to send a picture, I think that you could send a picture there and get that. Like my understanding of that is that is an official that's an official resource, and those, if they say that's legal, that's similar to, like, it's basically an adjunct to the Q&A forum specifically for sending in pictures of drones and getting someone to say yes or no to them, and that someone being someone on game design. So that's my understanding of that resource.
And Sam, would it be fair to say that if somebody, if you had a question on something and somebody brought a response to a submission there on legal to you, and where they said it was legal, that you would accept that?
Yeah, the same way, like unless I'm misunderstanding and there's somewhere that says that's not the case, though, if that's not the case, I don't know what the use of that resource is. So I would accept that the same way that I would accept a forum answer. Like if you get a question answered on the forum and the answer is yes, you can use this part, and there's been some question about can you use this part, you've got an answer, you can print that out and bring it to a tournament, and if an inspector has doubts, you show it to them, and well, that's an official answer. So I would treat the Is Your Drone legal the same way as that.
All right. Any questions about reffing, referee, game rules, or judging? All righty. Definitely take a look at what your judging sessions are, because you have, I believe, Fiona, it's a 15-minute session with the judges. Is that right? So you have a 15-minute session with the judges. Be prepared for that. The game manual part 1 refers to what that process would look like. And you have 5 minutes basically to make a presentation to the judges. You need to decide what it is you want to do. You have 5 minutes to impress the judges that you're an amazing team and that you deserve all these awards. So how do you condense everything down to 5 minutes? So That's always a fun one, but that will happen on Sunday morning, first thing Sunday morning before any of the game play happens with that. So the gameplay then, if you haven't done it before, there will be at least five matches you'll have that are randomly assigned your alliances, qualifying matches. And then based on your rankings with that, and we aren't going to go into the rankings here, but the rankings are described in the game manual. Based on the rankings, then there'll be elimination matches at the end where it will be to determine who the winning alliance is for that. So that will be elimination at the end. So it starts out with the qualifying matches that are totally random. You don't know until maybe 5 minutes before the match starts who your alliance partners are going to be and who your opponents are going to be in all your matches. So you don't get that until 5 minutes ahead of time. Then we hand out those match sheets, and the games begin. Let the games begin. So that's where everything starts here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the tournament day and how that works in future ones. But that's kind of the essence of the day, and then of course at the end we'll have an award ceremony at the end of the day there. So, all right, any other questions related to those topics? All right, so I've asked Joseph to join us here. Joseph is no longer an FTC member. So Joseph went through first LEGO League and then first Tech Challenge and is now an engineering major at Walla Walla University. So I asked him to join us, and we'll ask him to join us each time and kind of share some pro tips, just some things to be kind of like, hey, what should we look at? What are some cool things that could help us out as you're getting going here? So just want to give you some time to do that.
Thank you so much. Just a little background. So I was captain of my first LEGO League and first Tech Challenge teams for the past 7 years, and I currently mentor at one time between 12 and 14 first LEGO League and first Tech Challenge and first robotics competition teams from around the country. And this part of the season is, in my opinion, it's the most difficult because all the teams are trying to figure out their identity, because every team's identity is completely different. You have some teams that are more, they're very quiet, they're subdued, they're just working on their robot, they're working on doing their stuff, and they're getting it done. There's some teams that are very, very loud, they're outgoing, they're having lots of fun, they're doing stuff. And just trying to figure out that team identity of what you are is, at this point in the season, one of the most important things that I've always told my teams is we need to figure out who we are before we can figure out what we're going to do. And because we figure out who we are and how we want to approach things, it makes the season go much smoother than it does if we don't do this. So a big tip is just finding out what your team is and how everybody works together. Figuring out your leadership structure. Does everybody do everything? Do you have sub teams? Do you have a programming team? Do you have a software team? Do you have an outreach team? How does that all work together? It's just always something at this point in the season it's good to be kind of figuring out and getting prepared for. So that as you go through building your robot, writing your notebooks, and doing outreach events, that you can have very successful, structured, and simpler ways of going about doing things. As far as the robot goes at this point in the season, this time is kind of where teams are starting to figure out what are some ideas. So some of my teams right now, in fact, none of them have even similar designs because they're all chose something that they wanted to do, and they're going completely different directions with it. So it's a lot of figuring out just what's the problem. What do we want to address? This game has a lot of different moving parts to it. There's different parts in autonomous. There's different parts in teleop as far as scoring, and then there's different options for endgame. So picking and choosing what different tasks your team wants to address, because more often than not, most teams cannot do everything really, really well. It's very, very hard to build a robot that does everything perfectly. It's much easier to pick maybe half the tasks or 3/4 of the tasks and get those much, much better, because then it allows you to have a lot more time refining subsystems, ensuring things aren't breaking, ensuring it's consistent, and it's working well, and of course is legal by the rules. So that's always another piece of advice I give at this point in the season is pick what you want to do. Don't try to do everything, because biting off more than you can chew is something I've personally done with my team, and we've struggled with it, but we learned a lot from having that happen to us. The other thing is on the software side, most teams won't have robots done for a few weeks, even months. That doesn't mean your software has to just be sitting there doing nothing. You can have kids looking into different ways to learn programming. Maybe somebody wants to try and learn Java. Somebody wants to try and learn how to use the web camera to do the vision system. It first has all their documentation for OpenCV and the April tags that are available, and just kind of figuring out what you want to do with these different things, because there's so much you can do with software. In fact, like systems for my personal teams that we used were developed over the course of years. So it's never just, we have to write all of our code now. It's very much you're building the foundation. You're just slowly building to something bigger and bigger throughout not just the season, but across multiple seasons, and trying to make things as simple and consistent as possible. Also, please have your kids back up their code to a place, whether it's GitHub, whether you're just copying the files to a flash drive or a external hard drive. It's very, very important. This isn't FTC, but one of my FLL teams I coach was getting ready for a competition 2 weeks ago. They opened up their laptop one day and all their code had corrupted the day before. So it's very, very important to have backups of everything so that you could revert back to something if something doesn't work, or you make a change and it completely messes up everything. You have to just revert back. It's always good to have a backup to fall back on in case of anything going wrong. As far as more on the mechanical side of things, this
Joseph,
game,
just a question on that, if I can interrupt just a minute. To back it up, what's the best method to do that? Is that just plugging in a USB cable and using the software?
with Gatorbytes last years, we've just used GitHub because we can just, anytime we make a change, we just push it to GitHub, we make a commit, and we have change logs for everything. It can be a little bit
we're using what method were you using for programming though?
Android Studio / IntelliJ.
Okay, so if you're using Android Studio, that works. If you're using the blocks online, then probably the easiest way that I've seen is to plug a USB cable into your control hub and use the Rev hardware client, and there's a place there you can download everything, you can back everything up to it. And the simplest thing to do is just, if you have a OneDrive or Google Drive, something, just make a folder for every day and just drop it at the end of every day, save everything into that, a copy of everything, and that way you can do it. That's a very simple way to do it, just by having a different folder. And then if you have to go back 2 weeks and pull up that code, you can do that. Or if everything gets corrupted, you have that opportunity. But that's really good advice to do it. Like I say, but if you're using OnBot Java or you're using blocks, just use the Rev hardware client to download that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So more on the hardware things. I don't want to go too deep into hardware. This game has some different systems that are required, and there's lots of different ways to do this. One of the most common methods that you're going to hear teams throwing around this year is called linear extension of some sort. There's lots of different resources for that. GoBuilda has linear slide kits. There's also other suppliers of linear slides, including Mizumi and Studica. And also you can just get drawer slides from Home Depot, but they're kind of heavy and I don't recommend them. And you just have lots of options. You don't have to use slides. You could use an arm. Some teams I know are using 4 bars. Some teams are they're not even using an arm. They're just becoming a delivery bot. So there's lots of different options available to teams this year for what they want to do on the mechanical side of things. There's no one perfect way to do anything. Slides are good, but you will see teams do very well without slides. You'll see teams do very well with different strategies that I don't even know have kind of been thrown around yet. And it's just all about kind of trying to figure out what your team wants to do, and that goes back to then figuring out what you want to focus in the competition. Because if you have to have, we have slides, we have an intake, and we have a drone shooter, we have a hang, all of a sudden you are starting to max out motors pretty fast. And with only having 8 motors, it's good to look into, well, what are some different ways of doing things so that we can save resources while still having a robot that is built to what the team wants.
And Joseph, I want to affirm what you said, before, where it's, I guess the way I put it is it's often better to do a few things really well than a lot of things mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
So choose what you want to do. And I have seen teams that have very simple robots, and because they pair with somebody else that they complement, I've seen them clean house. But it just varies, it can depend. But being able to do a few things well often is better than trying to accomplish everything. Every year, the game is meant to be super complex and challenging for those that want to do that. But it's always meant to be where I can't remember if it's 40% of the game scoring can be done just with a push bot. So there's always things that can be done very, very simply. So start out with the basics and then build from there.
To chime in on that a little bit, and from kind of a judging perspective, it's an awesome idea to do some kind of formal brainstorming and like ranking ideas, like have the students go through the rules and list all of the different ways to score points, and then use some kind of a system to discuss which ones are best to focus on. Because there's a couple of different places in the award descriptions that talk about that kind of like formal strategic analysis. So having done that, I mean, it's a good idea to get you on the path towards specializing in an area so you could be really good at a couple things. And it puts you into having some cool stuff to talk about to the judges strategy wise.
Lafayette, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Joseph. This is Lafayette. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. First of all, thank you for giving us such a detailed download of information. It's really, really valuable. Also, congratulations on your studies at Walla Walla, and I hope you have a wonderful matriculation through that wonderful school. I don't want to oversimplify all the information that you provided to us, and particularly for a rookie team, which is what I represent. At the very, very beginning, kind of your presentation there, you're mentioning different things to sort of approach at the top of the season. Perhaps you can maybe, at least for my benefit, or maybe for anyone else on here who's a rookie team, give me your top 3 team that you were mentoring going in at the top of the season to get their swim lanes together, if you will. Maybe your top 3. I think you mentioned something about the build and then the outreach notebook and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, one of my teams, their name is, I mentored there in SoCal. Their name is Eat Your Vegetables, and so the biggest thing that they have going for them is their team spirit. So they have their shirts and stuff, but they decided that they would be really fun and funny if they got these giant vegetable hats. So each of them have one of them has a broccoli, one of them has an onion, one of them has a piece of corn, one of them is a tomato, and they wear these giant vegetable hats at the competition. So they're figuring out their team. They had their team identity within the first week. what they could then do is they started structuring their notebook and their kind of their outreach towards kind of their team's theme. So they reached out to some local farmers markets. They did some other stuff within the agricultural industry to kind of tie into their team's theme for their outreach. Because then they can connect with judges and they can tell their team's story. Because the biggest thing that their my teams we try to do in judging interviews is we try to tell our story. It doesn't matter necessarily what we did or how much of something we did. If we can tell an interesting story about our team and how we got through our season, we found that that's 90% of what is success can come from within the judging interviews. So just kind of figuring out ways to tie different things together, because then when you start having that mesh of different things you can tell the judges, then they'll ask a question about something, and then you'll have somebody else chime in and remember this one story, this one experience we had, and this connection we made, and that led to this idea for a robot. And then it continuously goes around, and that can really, really help. Another thing for robot I really recommend is having your students take a look through Game Manual 0. It is an open source, like community-based resource that has been built by FTC teams. I'm going to put the link to it here in the chat. It is basically like Game Manual Part 1, Game Manual Part 2, but it's all for resources for robot design. And it has an overview of different mechanical systems and the basics of mechanical design, and it's a really, really good resource to have a starting point. Because one of the things that my team did when we first started our rookie year in First Leg League all the way up to my last year in First Tech Challenges, at the beginning of each season, we'd go into a room with a bunch of whiteboards, and we'd just sit there for, sometimes it was 30 minutes, sometimes it was 3.5 hours. So we would just be drawing ideas and taking pictures of stuff and just trying to get ideas moving, because more often than not, your first 10 ideas aren't going to be what you end up with. At least it's not been that for us. It's taken a lot of times weeks and even months for us to actually come up with our robot designs. And so it's just kind of figuring out ways to get everybody thinking together, and it builds teamwork. Then you have two people working on, we have a design for this drone launcher. So I had one of my teams doing that, and they had two of the sisters on the team, and then one of the other girls. They were all working together on their drone launcher. They started building a prototype the first day, and the prototype didn't work, but it allowed them to, over the few weeks, have something that they continue to work on and get working. Another team I know, they saw all of the claw robots last year. That's like, we don't want an intake, we want to build a claw. And so they started, first day, they built a basic claw with parts, and they just continued to use that design and make tweaks and stuff. But at the same time, they have other members on their team working on other ideas, because then that way you have one system. It's really hard for 5 or 6 people to work on that one thing. But if you split it up and you have different designs and different subsystems, you have then 6, 9, 12, 15 kids that all can be working on different things, and they're all getting that learning experience of learning about mechanical design and thinking through the engineering process and testing and troubleshooting and fixing things. And that way, not only does it help the team, but it helps all the individual students get the best experience from the program. I hope that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No, thank you very much for that detailed answer. That's very, very helpful. I appreciate that, Joseph.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I put in the chat a link to Husky Lens. If you haven't checked that out, it's worth checking out. It's an AI camera that is legal for FTC, and my understanding, I have not tested it, but my understanding is there's a driver now available for it. Part of, you should be able to select that in the firmware or the game and the robot controller. But it has a lot of intelligence built into it, including April tags. So it's a great tool to be able to use. Only about $60, to add to it. So very, very useful tool. We've heard really good things about it. So I think it would be a worthwhile investment, and something, again, you can have, if you're programmers, that's something somebody can figure out. The company even sells basically little robots specifically for that, where you can figure out how it works, on a non-FTC robot, to say, okay, how do we make this thing work, and make those decisions and think through that logic on something else while they're still building your actual competition robot. Then you can drop it on your competition robot and apply the code to the FTC, and you get going with it. So, all right. Thank you all very much. I think those are the major topics that we wanted to cover today. We'll have another call in December. We're going to do monthly calls. Let me just ask, I've been just kind of debating whether we keep it on a Sunday. Sundays have advantages and disadvantages, or if a weekday is better. Each one has its advantages. Any thoughts on that before we go? Does the Sunday work okay?
Sunday works well for me.
Okay, so we'll keep doing it. And like I say, we will always record these, because we know that no matter which day, whatever day time we choose, there's going to be a conflict with somebody's somebody's calendar with that. So we will always record it, and have that available for for people. We'll drop it on our YouTube channel so that you can jump in there for anybody that misses it. So always rest assured that we do record these. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you for doing First Tech Challenge. This is going to be an exciting season. A lot of fun stuff going with it, and we're looking forward to a good competition on April 14. So we will see you there. Have a great rest of your week, this coming week, and a good Thanksgiving vacation. Get some rest over that time.
Definitely will.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.